Hello everyone, it's Monday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Strikes and attacks resumed on Friday after the 7-day truce between Israel and Hamas collapsed. The Israel Defense Forces extended its ground operations to southern Gaza, saying these would be of no less strength than its earlier ones in the north. The border of northern Israel and southern Lebanon is also seeing clashes as Israel and Hezbollah continue to exchange fire. There were efforts to resume talks with representatives of Israel's intelligence agency Mossad going to Qatar to negotiate with Hamas. However, this just reached a dead end. How is the Israel-Hamas war developing and how do experts see these events? To answer this, we have invited Professor Park Hyon-do from the Euro-MENA Institute of Sogang University. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And we also have Professor Scott Walker from the United Arab Emirates University. Welcome to the show, Professor Walker.
Thank you for having me.
Now, first question to our Professor Walker. Now, after a 7-day pause in fighting, the truce broke and the fighting began again. First of all, why was it ended and how do you see the possibility of another truce?
In short, I think what happened was these exchanges are going well as long as Hamas had enough prisoners, live, healthy, female and children, non-combatants. But I think they were running out, and in the last round of deals, they started proposing people who were not women and children, even though they know a number of those are missing. That's either because they're dead or because they can't find them, or maybe they're occupied or they're being in the possession of some other faction besides Hamas that Hamas doesn't have control over. So Israel said, no, that's not acceptable. We want to have all the women and children. Hamas said no. Somehow, depending on who you talk to, but either way, it kind of broke down. Israel says that Hamas's response to the last Israeli demand was to fire off some rockets, and that was it. So, yeah, I don't think there's a lot of interest on either side because, you don't see anyone on either side saying they want to have any more ceasefires at this point. Israel wants to continue with its desire to cleanse Hamas from all of the Gaza Strip. And as far as Hamas goes, they've said we're not going to have any more of these hostage release or prisoner release things until the war is over. So, without some sort of major push from international actors, there's not a lot of hope right now for this truce. And I think there's very widespread skepticism, although, this is a type of situation where anything can happen. But, at the moment, everybody's pretty skeptical about that kind of thing happening again.
All right, so not much interest in both sides for the ceasefire. Now, Professor Park, before the ceasefire, Israel has been concentrating military activity in northern Gaza. But following the end of the truce, it began carrying out strikes in the southern part of the enclave as well. How has the military activity been carried out?
Well, first of all, according to the report, unconfirmed, about 70% of the ground forces in the northern Gaza withdrew because of the harsh attack and also the frequent attack by the Hamas, which means that Hamas attack is quite successful. And concerning as for the southern Gaza, a huge death toll is the result of less than 24 hours of Israeli bombing. And after a truce deal expires, literally bombs rain down on southern Gaza. And before the bombing, during the ceasefire, actually Pope Francis harshly criticized the Israeli bombing of Gaza as not a war but a terrorism. But the U.S. also has been pushing for a more targeted approach. But nevertheless, according to no, I have some kind of problem with just a moment. Yeah, according to an investigation by local the Israeli magazine, the Israeli army's expanded authorization for bombing non-military targets and loosened constraints regarding expected civilian casualties. So, which means that there is no the differentiation between civilian targets and military targets right now. That is what is going on in the southern Gaza right now.
All right, I see, Professor Park. Now, as our Professor Park explained to us in detail, Professor Walker, Israel launched a new phase of the war, expanding attacks in the south. And it published a map dividing the enclave into blocks to order civilians to move. Given that more than 70% of the total population of Gaza Strip is actually at the southern Gaza Strip right now, how is the civilian evacuation going, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know that there is what you could call a civilian evacuation. I think that's a unilateral suggestion on the side of Israel to say that basically they want to declare a few hours before they're going to carry out an operation that they want everyone to clear out of a certain area. I think that kind of absolves them of some sort of criticism of a war crime or something like that. But the thing is, it's not like Korea. I've been to Korea, and it's like every inch of Korea is completely covered on the internet grid. Great connectivity, blah, 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 blah. Here in the Middle East, especially in a place like Gaza, maybe not as good. We don't even have, my house doesn't even have an address. So to tell people, okay, you've got 2 hours to move to this one place, on a map, even if you had internet, that would be very difficult. And of course, we know in a lot of ways, they don't have very good internet connectivity. Telling people to move that quickly isn't really realistic, and telling people to evacuate to these little tiny areas based on what one side says is scary, because it's basically to help the Israeli operation. And the UN, as well as a lot of major relief organizations, have said we can't support this because you're telling people to move somewhere, but there may not be any room for them. There may not be any food or water or any protection whatsoever. So, right now, even I was watching a podcast on Times of Israel yesterday. Even a lot of Israeli experts are like, how is this really going to work? It's pretty half-baked, and it's hard to expect people who have already been refugees once. Remember, at least half the people in Gaza are refugees right now. They're not living in their homes. They've been displaced once already. Telling them to move again and then maybe again and again isn't going to work, especially when they've already been bombed in places that they moved to that were supposedly safe. So pretty much I'm not really optimistic about that at the moment. Maybe if it were well developed over time, they might come up with something, but to just drop that plan overnight to move people around doesn't sound like a winning proposal to me.
All right, I see. So not much civilian evacuation is possible right now. All right. Well, civilian evacuation is one thing, and another thing is to provide humanitarian aid to refugee-packed southern districts. And so, Professor Park, regarding this, the White House said earlier that Israel will allow aid trucks to get into the Gaza Strip. Has aid been going through the Rafah crossing despite the collapse of a truce between Israel and Hamas?
Well, very frankly speaking, a very limited number of aid trucks has managed to enter the besieged Gaza Strip through Egyptian the border crossing, the Rafah. And according to the organization, the Palestine Red Crescent crews have now received the aid trucks through the Rafah crossing from their partners in Egypt. But according to Adnan Abu Hassan, a spokesperson for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East, only a very small number of humanitarian aid trucks are coming to Gaza. Very few of them. It is just like a drop in the ocean. Mm-hmm. And according to him, what is happening in Gaza exceeds the capabilities of countries. And also, currently around 2 million Palestinians are being pushed towards Rafah, and Israel started bombing the enclave again, which means that there is no safety place, there is no safe haven right now, and only this very limited number of aid trucks are coming.
All right, a drop in the ocean. I see your point, Professor Park. Now, not just in Gaza Strip, Professor Walker, strikes are also taking place on the Lebanese side of the border, with attacks between Israel and Hezbollah has also resumed since the truce broke. Now, how has the situation been near the border with Lebanon?
It sounds like they were really at a lull during the truce, and now they've picked up. Whether it's worse now than before the truce is a little bit hard to say, but it has picked up. There are a limited number of people being killed. I think maybe a total of 100 have died so far, or something like that, in or in the low hundreds in Lebanon. Most of those are some sort of combatant. There have been some bombings, some killings, and some injuries in Israel as well. So I think it's a bit of tit for tat. I bomb you, you're going to bomb me. But Hezbollah hasn't really in force entered into this conflict, and I wouldn't be the one to be able to predict that. But I think obviously that would be a huge game changer if Hezbollah did decide to jump into this full force. But then this thing would really escalate into some kind of really heavy-duty conflict that could have some really bad results for not only people in Gaza, but also now people in southern Lebanon would be really affected as well. There is some destruction and damage, but it's sort of limited at the moment. But I think it is a kind of hold this space, watch this space situation where soon we could see some sort of possible escalation. But I mean, if you just go through the history, it's been a long time since anybody directly attacked Israel like that, a country from outside. So I would kind of doubt it, but we can't be sure until there are a few other attacks. There's some attacks. Yemen has been attacking some American tankers and some other vessels and things in the off the coast of the Gulf. So it's there may be some limited responses from the Houthis in Yemen or from the Hezbollah, but I don't at this point don't see it becoming an Arab versus Israel kind of big war like 1967 or something. So but we'll have to hang on and see for sure. But at this point, there's something happening, but doesn't appear to be escalating out of control at the northern border right now.
All right, I see. Tit for tat attacks being exchanged right now. Now, let's turn our eyes to possibilities of war expansion. And so, Professor Park, some media outlets pointed out that the war could be expanded to other regions as Israeli warplanes struck targets near Syria's capital on Saturday. And not just that, there were also reports that U.S. warship and commercial vessels came under attack by the Houthis, an Iran-backed rebel group. How do you see such worries of the war spreading out to other regions?
Well, it is very difficult to whether the war would be bigger and wider, but there is also the possibility. But I think the possibility is very low. But nevertheless, Israeli warplanes struck targets near the Syrian capital city early Saturday, and according to the Syrian state news agency, citing a military source, Israeli jets carried out an air attack from the direction of the Golan Heights and targeting sites in the vicinity of Damascus. And also, we have reports coming that the two Iranian commanding officers were killed. First, actually, the casualties in this war. So Iran may react to such killing, but I think the wider, bigger war in the region is quite actually the possibility is very low.
All right, I see. So possibility for a war to get bigger is quite low at this point. Now, Professor Walker, it's not like there weren't any efforts to come up with another, ceasefire or truce. There was a round of negotiations in Qatar between Israel's Mossad intelligence agency and Hamas. But after reportedly reaching a dead end, the team was recalled. Now, what could have been the details of this negotiation? And in your opinion, why do you think it failed?
Well, we kind of discussed this already in the first question, but it sounds more like a situation where Israel's reached a point of diminishing returns by continuing to engage in the ceasefire and having some hostage exchanges. The quality and number of the hostages return is getting lower. By lower quality, I mean it's now they're running out of women and children. They're proposing regular soldiers when there's still a lot of missing people. And I think I saw an interesting interview yesterday with someone who was in contact with Israel with the Mossad at that time. They basically said Israel just made the decision. There's a little bit to be gained by these negotiations. Get maybe 5 people back today or something. But the reality is, our interest is in going in and wiping out Hamas, and it's not in bargaining with Hamas and taking these little gains from them, decreasing in value every time. So they're just like, okay, and then so they turn around, they demanded more from Hamas in that negotiation. Hamas said no, and they fired some missiles, and that was kind of it. So at least in terms of the two major actors, there's not a lot of movement. right now in that area. I think Israel's decided we want to go ahead and carry out this operation. And Hamas is like, we realize we're not going to get anywhere near all of our hostages back until the end of the war, or prisoners, whatever we want to call them. So, yeah, it's looking pretty dead at the moment. You never know. Someone else, Norway or something, could come up with a new proposal or something, but it doesn't look good because there's not a lot of people aren't really seeing eye to eye on what's happening there. So, yep.
All right, I see your point, Professor. Now, before we move on to the next question, I'd like to point out that we are currently hearing our Professor Park's voices only because of the technical glitches. But Professor Park, shifting gears to plans Israel has for the war against Hamas on the Gaza Strip. The Financial Times claimed that Israel is planning a campaign that will stretch for a year or more, from the most intensive ground offensive to a transition and stabilization process afterward. Could you tell us more about what Israel could be planning to do?
The biggest problem for the security of Israel, according to Israeli government, is who would control the Gaza. As a matter of fact, actually, it is quite impossible for Israeli to station their armies actually permanently on the ground. It is quite impractical. And probably Israel likes the Egypt to take control of the Gaza, but the Egyptian government is not for it, because already Egypt has already a lot of the immigrants from the African countries. It actually housed almost 9 million the refugees from African and other countries, and in addition to that, more than 2 million Gaza people. Well, it is a big burden. Even though Israel is said to offer the financial aid to Egypt would not take it. And another possibility is that actually the Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, can take control of it, but it is Israel does not like it very much. And also the Arab countries can take care of it, but it is quite unrealistic. So probably the Egyptian option is the best, but Egypt is hesitating. What is really concerned? What really concerns actually the Israelis actually the dismantle Hamas as a governing authority. Well, perhaps the governing authority dismantling the Hamas is quite possible, but it takes time, and it is impossible to dismantle the Hamas forever. This is the reality. So I don't know how actually the Israel can possibly deploy their own plans, ignoring all international outcries for any the killing people. So now Israel actually, even though it has a long-term plan, but nevertheless it is very difficult to expect the Israel dismantling Hamas forever.
Right, I see. Well, Professor Park, I'd like to ask you one more question about Israel's plan. Israel has reportedly informed several Arab states that it wants to carve out a buffer zone on the Palestinian side of Gaza's border after the war ends to prevent future attacks. How might Arab states be, reacting to Israel's such plan for a buffer zone?
Well, the problem is that who would control the Gaza, even though there is a buffer zone? That's the problem. No Arab states have shown any willingness to police or administer Gaza in the future. And most of the countries condemned the Israelis' offensive that has killed more than 15,000 people. And also the entirely leveled the swath of the Gaza's urban areas. In this case, actually, what countries that can possibly take control of the Gaza, even though there is a buffer zone? This is the problem, and also it will backfire in their own countries, like Egypt and also Jordan. All those countries have a lot of people actually criticizing the unwillingness of this government and also the cruel actually bombing of Israel. And it might backfire in their own country. So it is very difficult. Even though there is a buffer zone, still the problem goes on. So probably the best and also ideal, actually, the solution is the international community to get involved and to make two states possible, like a Palestinian state and Israel. That is the best option, but there is a lot of words, but there is no action.
All right, I see. So what matters is who will control the Gaza Strip. Well, Professor Walker, meanwhile, the U.S. continues to stress that it will not allow the forced relocation of Palestinians or any redrawing of the current border of the Gaza Strip. How might Washington be viewing Israel's post-war plans?
Well, I don't know how we can say what Israel's post-war plans are. As we said last time, we don't know if Netanyahu is going to survive. And even if he does, there are important American political forces, and depending on how the next election goes, you can't just say the U.S. will do this or that. I suppose if Ron DeSantis becomes the next president, I suppose he'd support Israel, relocating all sorts of people and changing borders and doing all sorts of things. But these things are really, really highly problematic. And if you think people are opposed to Israel now, you just wait until they try things like forcing people out. These people have already been forced out. That's why they're in Gaza in the first place. So, forcing people out of a place they've been forced out of, and it doesn't seem very likely. So this is all just really conjectural, I think. I don't think, and first of all, USA doesn't allow or control anything. Maybe in the 60s or 70s they had that kind of power, but today they're just another actor in the system. I think, there's, if you look at the public opinion in the United States, although there's a lot of support for Israel, there's also a lot of opposition to what's going on as well. So U.S. isn't going to write Israel a blank check to kind of, from its perspective, to do whatever it wants to. There's going to be some significant limits to what they're going to want Israel to do. I would think it'd be something like when this war is over, USA will just get out this checkbook and write some huge, tens, probably hundreds of billions of dollars in aid, trying to fix the region. I don't think USA is going to support like just evacuating everyone out of Gaza and moving them to some hellhole in Egypt or somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I don't see that right now. So, but it's the Middle East, so anything can happen.
All right, I see your point, Professor Walker. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Park and Professor Walker, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.